I am joined today by Alison Gretz. Alison has had an illustrious career successfully leading user experience, creative, content design, and product design teams at bootstrapping startups, Fortune 100 giants like Thomson Reuters and Target, as well as at marketing and digital entities such as Shutterfly and Fallon. In September of 2023, she launched her company Design by Design, offering leadership coaching and training for design leaders. Alison, thank you so much for being in my orbit, and thank you for joining me today on Cupalo Conversations.
Absolutely. What a great intro. I'm going to have to steal that because you captured like all of it very quickly. That's awesome.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad to talk to you today about leadership. That's what I would love to talk about. Before
Mhm.
we do, first off, huge congratulations on going out on your own. I'm so excited for you, and I feel like we're on this parallel journey. We both started our companies in
Mhm.
September of 2023. So, what was the catalyst for you to go out on your own? What gap did you see in the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, growing up through design, I knew that one of the biggest issues with design leaders being able to take on the responsibility they wanted, the influence they wanted, truly make a difference in their businesses was leadership development, both from a business acumen standpoint to finding all the skills that they needed to develop to truly grow through management, directorship, and get to higher and higher levels so that they could have that influence as design leaders. And then I realized for myself, after leading through 2020 and the pandemic and leading huge teams, that my values and what I really enjoyed were not quite in sync anymore with my day-to-day responsibilities and what I was doing. And there was this moment where the stars kind of aligned and an opportunity came up to just try something. And I've always known I wanted to do my own thing, but the opportunity had never quite aligned the way that it did and allowed me to just jump and try things. My first 6 months, as we've spoken about, has been figuring out product market fit. Like, I know there's these problems I want to solve for these people that I know intimately. Like, what does that look like to do my own thing? And it's been really fun to build and get back to some of my roots in that too.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you did. I feel like again, it's having people in your corner who are going through the same thing. It's quite validating and it's very brave what you're doing. So I
Well, you
am
too.
glad. Well, I appreciate that we're both in this boat together. So
Hmm.
I would love to dive in. I feel like I talk to a lot of people being in recruiting and staffing, a lot of people who go from being an individual contributor to a manager, they
Hmm.
get into management and then they keep getting promoted, but very few actually get the type of mentorship and guidance that they need. So, I would love to talk to you about the training or lack thereof, I should say, in companies, both big and small. What would you say companies should be doing to invest in better frameworks, better tools for their people who are going to be moving into leadership roles?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think that first management role for anybody is this critical time where, regardless of discipline, but I think especially for craftspeople, you realize that what got me here is not always serving me anymore. And you're confident and competent and really good at your craft, which is why this opportunity opened up. But if you're someone like me and you went to art school and you've been focused on craft for so long, nobody's teaching you some of the more strategic elements of being a business leader and running teams. And so you're learning that on the go on other people that you're managing at the time. And quickly it becomes very overwhelming for people. They realize how big of an impact they are having on the people that they now manage. And they're thinking a lot about the good managers, the not so great managers, the terrible managers that they've had, and trying to create a path to be the manager that they want to be and choose to be. And only some people make it through their first 12 to 18 months. Some decide, okay, individual contributorship and going back to the craft is what's right for me, and that's great. Some muddle on through, that first period and they find what works, what doesn't work. I think that certainly was my path. A lot of experimentation and some really bad moments where I look back at my first manager job and my first couple and go like, oh my gosh, my team members were so patient with me, so kind, and I was learning as I went. I think if you get stuck in that management position and you don't learn some more strategic skills like communication at the right level of the business, or stakeholder management, or how to manage through change effectively, you're never going to have the opportunities to move up. And yet, leadership development, especially in a lot of large companies, tends to really only begin at the director level. So you are in this like messy middle of management without support, without access to learning resources, kind of expected to just make your own way. And yet we know from like people, even the Surgeon General of the States, Vivek Murthy, that that manager role has such a critical place in our lives as humans on our overall well-being, our engagement with work, our mental health. So we've got all these people stepping into management and struggling and causing struggle. I think it's just a gap that we need to do better as a society, quite frankly. And I think people really can do better if they're just given the access to tools, education, support, and given different models of leadership that they can look up to and choose as well.
Walk me through what are some of the tools and the frameworks that you're teaching people, that you're giving them in their toolbox that they might have not had before?
I love that question because I've built a toolbox over 10 years of leading different teams, and some of it is things that I borrow from other thought leaders. For example, the Radical Candor framework by Kim Scott. She recently renamed it to be Compassionate Candor, which is what she always meant, but it just got wildly misinterpreted, which is probably for a whole other podcast. So I teach everyone about radical/compassionate candor, and being able to give really direct but kind feedback. That's one thing I teach all of my teams that I led and now all of my students and coachees. But what I've done over the past 6 to 9 months is be building really my own tools, systems that I provide to some of my students that model after Kim's framework, for example, or take into account like behavioral science things like the Yerkes-Dodson law of like the right amount of stretch before it becomes stressful. And I put all of this together in online courses right now where I can be working side by side with a group of students and going into ways they can strategically think about stakeholder management and influence, to being better at radical candor and setting boundaries with a framework that I've created. And I want to package all of that up and be able to give it to as many people as possible. Most recently, I created a tool that I call the manager profile. And I'm actually doing that with an alpha cohort this week to see how do they use this tool and how else can I improve it. But it helps individual contributors who are considering management look at all of the skill sets that I've put into this tool and say, okay, I'm really good at this one, but I know nothing about this, so I'm going to need extra support here. And very early on in their journey, start to identify what those things might be before they're suddenly in the struggle of trying to learn and manage and tackle all of the same things at once.
That's great. Do you think people, I feel like there must be some pressure for people in their craft who maybe love what they do and they get so good at it that the company they're with, big or small, says, "Oh, you would be great at leading people, right, in this because you're so good at being, a user experience designer, or you're so great at
Mm-hmm.
being a software engineer, and you've gotten this far." But I'm wondering, is that always the right move? I think that there's a lot of
Mm.
external pressure to move up. How do
Mm-hmm.
people know, no, despite the fact this is the trajectory, I would like to stay in my craft. I do not want to manage people. I don't want to be that type of leader. How do you coach people to determine A, that that is the right path for them, that being a manager is not correct? And B, I guess, how do you help companies too? I imagine companies must be really struggling with this because they get these people to get to a place
Mm-hmm.
where they're so, they're at their peak, right? How do you help both sides of the fence kind of navigate that? It seems like this very organic and sort of shoehorning thing that happens.
Mm-hmm. I'll start with the individual and then remind me to come back to the company
Yeah.
because I get so passionate about the individual. But as an individual, the first place I start in coaching is the why. Like, why do you think the management path is what you want? Are you being shoulded by society, your parents, your boss, your company? Do you see this as the only path and therefore you're kind of forcing yourself down it? So to really interrogate that meaning that you're assigning to the role. And then as part of this manager profile assessment too, what's really bringing you joy as part of your day? And if you hate dealing with other humans in general, management is all about humaning and you're not gonna like it. Or maybe you try it, but then have your, ways back out of it. I really do encourage a lot of people to try it and see how is their energy? How do you feel at the end of every day? And then for craftspeople, especially, I think there's certain things like getting into a state of flow in your work that continue to be really important regardless. Like that's been important for me as an IC to a VP. How do I find and make space for those states of creative flow, even if it's no longer in creative software, but in a PowerPoint presentation? And I found when I made sure I got that, I could handle the rest of the humaning, the admin, the negotiating, so long as I maintained some kind of roots to that creativity. So I start there, like, what are you shooting yourself about when it comes to management? Why do we think that is the label of success? And is that really true? Does that align with what you want out of life? Is where I start for everybody, because we just pick up on things we think we're supposed to do, but there's no playbook that says that's the only way. And the last thing I'll say about individuals, and I think companies have done this really well in the past few years, is there's more and more tracks for individual contributors to continue to get the monetary rewards, the title rewards, the responsibility rewards without having to take on the human side of managing and the different skills it takes to really maximize support and care for other humans. So there's options now that we maybe didn't have 10 years ago.
How would you advise companies approach folks who do not have the interest of the humaning and the people management to feel still like they are dignified? I think there's this
Mm-hmm.
concern around, if I don't do this, I am lesser than. How do you help
Mm-hmm.
companies reframe that?
It's so good because I think it comes down to that individual's manager again, right? And I think companies can provide both training in some of the soft skills around language and inclusivity. Because if we're talking about all career paths being equally viable and important, then the language becomes inclusive of folks who are choosing not to go into management. I think there's things that can be done to better leverage folks who are in principal, staff, distinguished roles as leaders in the company, whereas they maybe are not invited all the way into some of the rooms that are more administrative and management focused. So I think companies can do a lot more to leverage the leadership that they have in individual contributors. I think that's where we'll go in the next 5 years, is seeing more of that. But I also think it's supporting folks in that first or second manager role to know, how do I then manage people who may even be senior to me, but on an IC track? And then how do we build those relationships and those trusting partnerships? None of this infrastructure really exists because the roles didn't exist 5 years ago. So you've then got a lot of managers, directors muddling through it. And I think, unfortunately, with that lack of training on the human side of things, on the language, the soft skills, inclusion, they're messing it up. And people do feel like lesser than. I also think we'll evolve beyond that, because there's so much just broader than any one company that tells us the career path is a linear ladder and you climb the rungs. Whereas folks who are really choosing to sidestep out of leadership, out of these big management roles, and I think of yourself and me as well, to say, hey, I know I'm just going to start my own company. I would prefer to be a principal versus a VP. I would prefer to do these things. We're choosing something that's against the status quo. So for now, it will feel other, and bringing a mindset approach to it of saying like, yep, I'm being an other, but I'm also doing what's best for my energy, my health, all of these things. And I'm demonstrating a different way. I'm just experiencing it in a point of transition and how we think about it as a company, a society, a world, really.
You mentioned something about you should try it. You would advise that people give it a shot. They should
Yeah.
try being in that type of role to really know whether they like it or not.
Mhm.
What about someone who doesn't try it, whose manager is saying, come on, we really want you to step into this role? And every part of you is like, nope, this isn't going to fill my bucket.
Mhm.
I guess, what would you say to that person? Would you say, nope, I think you really should go try it because then you can know for sure? Or would you say, nope, trust your gut? I guess because I hear this a lot from people, especially in their quarterlies, right?
Mm.
Their manager is saying, we really need you to step up and become a manager. This is the only trajectory. What if there is no
Other
other
path.
option for them? Yeah, like how would you coach them through that scenario?
I will always tell people to trust their gut. Like, if you know that management is not where you want to go and your boss is pushing you that way, for example, I would trust your gut and I would be as radically clear and candid as you can. Like, no is a full sentence. Like, no, thank you. I really appreciate that you have these thoughts for me and that you're taking an investment in my career path. I have decided that managing other people is not for me. What other options do we have here? Or how can we pivot this discussion to be about my growth and development in my current role? For example, stretch assignments, ways that I can help out without taking on management responsibilities. I think that directness, that clarity, like if you know something's not for you, you have to say no. Otherwise, you're going to be 2 years in the future, look back, most likely regret that decision, and have maybe harmed others along the way because you were doing something that wasn't aligned with who you are and what your values are. If
It's
you're on that middle ground where you're like, maybe I do, but maybe I don't, what if I'm a terrible manager? What I would say to that person is we're all terrible managers, at least to start. Some people continue being terrible managers, but at least know that we all mess it up and it is a very tough transition. And usually the people who are on the fence because they're worried about being a terrible manager are the best managers because they're thinking about their impact on other people. And that's a great way to human with other humans. So I would, if it's self-doubt and kind of that self-deprecating thing, I would push that person to say, like, just give it a go. There's other ways that you can then pivot, and you can even be clear up front, especially if it is an internal promotion to manager, that you want to consider this probationary in some fashion and you want to do it for a year, and then have a conversation. How is it actually going? And do I want to sidestep back or up into a different role without as much management responsibility?
Tell me more about the transition state. I actually have never been a manager of people in title. I've always tried to be some capacity of a servant leader, no matter what
Mm-hmm.
role I'm in. But tell me more about the nitty gritty of what it is like for someone to go from an individual contributor to a manager,
Mm-hmm.
and what are the pain points? What are the things that would freak people out?
The biggest one that I hear from both my clients and then experience myself is the imposter syndrome and not feeling like the expert, feeling like you have to have all the answers and yet you don't have the answers. And people are looking to you to make informed decisions on things. You're being asked to maybe participate in budget conversations that you've never read a P&L before, you don't know what you're looking at. And so there's all of these alien things that you then have to suddenly appear to have confidence, or you feel like you're supposed to appear to have confidence while you're doing them. And it is very, very vulnerable to turn to someone who is your direct report and say, like, I've never done that before. I don't know how to do that. You've done it 10 times. Can you teach me? Because we think managers are supposed to be these powerful people that we look up to, right? And so I think there's this reckoning that we have in that first year to really in any position. I tell you, I had this feeling at director, I had this feeling at VP multiple times where it's like, why me? Who am I to think that I have anything to offer this group of humans? So the mind game is really real in pushing through that imposter syndrome. And then the ability to be both decisive, but open to new ideas, to really be able to leverage all of the brains on your team, all of the smarts. That's a thing that you have to gain comfort with, is making decisions even when you don't have all the answers, you don't have all the information. And there's decision making frameworks too that you can think about, is this going to be a big decision with a lot of repercussions, or a small decision that I can change my mind on later? And get comfortable with the pace of decision making, especially if you have a broader and broader scope. I'm sure there's other things that people might comment and email us about. But yeah, I hear so much about imposter syndrome from folks.
How much is self-confidence, or should I say lack of self-confidence, a part of that? And I know you work with people on this. Can you
Mm-hmm.
tell me a little bit more about developing or improving one's self-confidence? How do you help people to build on that?
And this is where I love coaching as an approach, because as a coach, part of my goal is to create a space where you can build that confidence muscle without me providing you any answers. Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to help you see the awesomeness that's inside, that gives you all of the evidence and reasons that you need not worry as much about confidence. The other thing I talk to people a lot about is my evolution on fake it till you make it, which I think of as more embody it until you feel it, right? Where sometimes the behavior comes before the feeling. And this is based in like psychology too. The behavior comes before the feeling. So if you just start doing the behavior, i.e., your shoulders are back, you're sitting more straight up, you're taking command of your space, you start doing those behaviors, you're going to start feeling more confident. Whereas if you sit, kind of hunched and you're talking to people as if you're lesser than, you're going to be really lighting that fire of lack of confidence. So however you can bring in the little experiments and start behaving more confident, you will start to feel it. And you'll also build those muscles, and things will be less scary the second time, the third time, the fourth time. And you start to realize everybody's feeling these things. And everybody wants you to be successful. Your direct reports want you to be successful as a manager. Your manager wants you to be successful. So all these people are cheering for you. Why aren't you cheering for yourself? Becomes like a big thing that I then work through with clients.
I love that. I was just brought back to, I remember in 2016, I was in a really rough place in terms of just professionally. I felt like I was at a dead end. And I
Mm-hmm.
learned this trick of having to embody your Superman or Superwoman.
Mm-hmm.
You envision the cape on your shoulders, pulling back your shoulders, how heavy that cape must be, and you walk and you put your
Mm-hmm.
arms out. I did this every day for months. I looked like such a fool, but it changed how I felt. And even it lightened my mood. I took, even though
Mm-hmm.
I felt kind of goofy, that actually worked in my advantage. It took away some of the maybe nervousness of trying to put myself out of my comfort zone. So I
Yeah.
love that you talked about that.
Yeah.
That's great. And maybe the Superman for
Yeah,
for
and
people will help.
there's an author and some research studies. The author's name's Amy Cuddy, and I know been sort of research that proves and disproves all of these things. The other thing I've been saying to myself, and I want to get this made into a poster and offer it to anybody, is do it anyway. Do the damn thing anyway. Do it scared. Do it nervous. Do it lacking knowledge. Do it for the first time. Just do it anyway. Do the damn thing. Because I think there's so many things that we just hold ourselves back from out of fear that something might happen. So just taking a leap and doing it and knowing like, oh, well, if that doesn't work out, I have all of these skill sets and muscles to fall back on. It'll be fine. It'll be
Yeah.
fine.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I was going to say today how you have imparted "do the damn thing" to me, and now it is part of my regular vernacular.
I
It
love
is
it.
it has helped me because I have had to do a lot of damn things lately,
Mm-hmm.
and they're always rough, they're bumpy, they're bad, but I do them anyway. And
Yeah,
so I'm grateful that you gave that to me.
you are
Um,
welcome.
I want to know how you feel about this sentence. Somebody recently said this to me and it's stuck with me ever since. I want to know what
Mm-hmm.
you think about this expression, I should say, that leaders want to be led. What do you think of that?
I haven't heard that before, so I'm not sure who said that, but what it makes me think of is, um, I mean, servant leadership's one way to put it, but it's also that we don't know all the answers. Like, leaders are just humans too. Everyone's trying to make sure that they eat lunch and get bathroom breaks during the day. So what is most helpful for any leader, really at any level in an organization, is their team and the people around them, their direct reports or parts of their organization, telling them, right? Or like making it as easy as possible to do the next damn thing. So it is so helpful when an employee comes in for a meeting with me, for example, and they say, hey, here's what we're going to talk about in the next half hour. Here's what I need from you. Here's what I do not want you to give me feedback on. And here's what we're ultimately trying to get to. And to me, that's leading your leader to be most helpful for you, but you're also helping them because they can actually just sit back and offer feedback, figure out, does the team need anything from me, without having to constantly be the one leading the charge. You're more coaching, guiding, nudging along the way and expecting a certain amount of leadership from the team around you.
Yeah, I love
Am I
that.
in
And
the ballpark?
yeah, I think so. No, absolutely. It was in the context of Dan Chamberlain. I don't know if that name rings a bell to you, but we did a
Mm-mm.
podcast together, and he said, when he thinks of his team, it's tell me what I can say no to, tell me what you need me to go blow up, what roadblocks can I remove? But
100%.
and so I think to your point, it's also empowering the team to have a voice and say, what do I need?
Yep.
And that goes into my next question around creating a psychologically safe workplace. I
Mm-hmm.
think the best leaders do this, but I would love to know, I think we've gotten, that's one of those terms that gets used a lot, but what does it mean for a leader to create a psychologically safe workplace? What is a psychologically safe workplace?
Yeah, and you'll probably find 100 definitions of this online, but I'll give you mine. And how I know I have a psychologically safe space around me for my team is if they can disagree with me in public, right? If they can say, hey, I have a different perspective about this without fear of repercussions. Unpsychologically safe is like fear that something bad will happen when I am myself, when I speak truth to power, or when I have a bad day, even, right? And so I think when you show up as a human to do right by the humans you are leading and managing, you should be creating a psychologically safe space. How I like to do it, and this is even just little tidbits and tricks that people can take away, is things like asking for dissenting opinions in a meeting. Especially as leaders, our voices carry so much weight. We have to go the extra mile to make it okay to speak truth to power, to offer dissenting opinions. So questions like, what are my riskiest assumptions in the way that I'm thinking about this? How might this fail, and what should I be doing differently? Or asking your team members how they think you should be approaching something or thinking about something. So really inviting in all the perspectives. I think really you then also have to abide by my somebody's no asshole policy, right? Like, I do not want to work with assholes or put up with assholes or bad behavior. I don't know if this is an explicit podcast or not, but we're going there.
We bring it.
Perfect. um, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of companies are unfortunately doing wrong right now, is people with less good behavior, less inclusive behavior, even outright toxic and bad behavior, are really being allowed to continue doing that. And that stops any ability for any leader to create a psychologically safe environment, because those people make it unpsychologically safe. And I think companies need to be much, much, much bolder with what behavior they're actually going to take action on, so that more people can be existing within safer environments in the workplace.
Do you think that leaders should speak last in a group setting where people are in a boardroom or they're in a Zoom call? But do you think that their opinion should be the last one heard?
90% of the time, sure. Yep, absolutely. Anything the highest paid person says in a room is going to influence everything that comes after that. Even if, like myself, in all of my management and leadership experiences, I try to like not be that person, right? I want to hear other people's opinions unfiltered based on my having a power position or any sense of fear that there may be, even in the most psychologically safe environments, there's still a power dynamic. And I've seen other leaders model this so well, where even if they are about to jump in, they say, actually, I'm going to hold my thoughts until after I hear from everybody else, because we're human too, and we're going to be excited about things and jump right in. So sometimes I do have to edit myself and walk it back, but I think you're going to get the best ideas when people don't know your position on a subject and when you create a safe space for everybody else to speak first.
That's great. Well, my last question for you today, in light of the fact we're still kind of early in the year, but what is top of mind for you in 2024?
Ooh, I'll give you a professional answer and then a personal answer. Professionally, I am experimenting with all sorts of support, whether it's coaching, tools, courses for managers, emerging leaders, experienced leaders who want to pick up some more of these skills. So I'm in like entrepreneur mode, experiment mode, and just really trying to be of service every day that I show up on the wild internet that we all work on. And so that's just fascinating to me. And I think we're on the precipice of a leadership evolution in that space, and I'm excited to be a part of it. On a personal level, I'm also having to learn what managing my new work-life balance even looks like as an entrepreneur. And some of my worst behaviors are showing up where like I'm working 60 plus hours a week, have a really hard time shutting the computer. But part of this lifestyle that I've chosen is also supposed to be about wellness and finding a new balance and a new way of being. So top of mind for me is like continuing to reassess my relationship with work and what I am putting out into the world and how I manage my own creative energy and excitement about things without overdoing it and finding that new balance. It's a very interesting dichotomy of experiences and one that will be an ongoing project this year for sure.
Yeah, well, you're not alone. And I too have been going through, like we talked about at the very beginning, the same, parallel journey here. So I share a
Mm-hmm.
lot of those similar struggles. And yet I also recognize that there's so much that fills my bucket in the work I do.
Oh,
And
I
that's a
love it.
gift.
I
Yeah, and
know. I
it's
love
palpable.
it. I love it. And I think that's how your clients, my clients, that's why people work with us is they can feel that energy. And I have to remember there are certain things that fill my energy tank so that I can give it to other people. And those
Yeah.
things need to be on my schedule as important than as everything else. And the never ending to-do list of an entrepreneur or a manager in an organization, the to-do list will always be there. You can always nudge goals, push things back, do things more minimally until you figure out if the value is there. Uh, so yeah, it's a wild ride, and I'm grateful to have met other people who are also on the ride and can help keep us all sort of in the right vein.
Yeah, we've got a lot of damn things to do.
We have so many damn things to do, and we're going to do them anyway. But which damn thing
Well,
is the right thing?
well, Allison, I can't thank you enough. I'm so grateful that you're in my orbit and you've taught me a lot today. And I feel like there's so many people that could use the messages that you had today, both the leaders and also those being led. So thank you for
Mm-hmm.
sharing your insights. And I'm so excited to see your journey continue to unfold here year after
Oh,
year.
thank you, Lauren. I'm so excited. Thanks for the space and the invite to be on today.